In every corner of the ancient world, people told stories to make sense of the mysteries around them, stories of the sky, the earth, and the powerful beings who shape both. Across Mesopotamia, Greece, and the distant Norse lands, one theme appears again and again: heavenly beings who cross the boundary between the divine and the human. Some arrived bearing knowledge, gifts, and guidance that changed the course of civilization. Others challenged higher powers, reshaping the balance between order and chaos. These myths, though separated by thousands of miles and countless generations, echo one another in surprising ways. They speak to something deep within us: our curiosity, our longing to understand where we came from, and our fascination with forces greater than ourselves. Whether it is the watchful Anunnaki of Mesopotamia, the defiant titans of Greece, or the mighty beings of the Norse realms, each tradition preserves a fragment of humanity's earliest attempts to explain the world. In this story, we will explore those connections, not as rigid historical accounts, but as windows into the imagination of our ancestors. Why did so many cultures share these patterns? What do these recurring themes reveal about human nature? And how have these ancient tales shaped the stories we still tell today? If you enjoy content that brings the past to life and uncovers the hidden links between civilizations, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue creating thoughtful, engaging stories that dive deep into history and mythology. Let us begin our journey into the shared memories of the ancient world. Across these ancient landscapes, where firelight flickered against temple walls and storytellers spoke into the vastness of night, a remarkable pattern quietly wove itself through the myths of many civilizations. It is the sense that humanity once lived closer to the divine, not in equality, but in proximity, close enough for knowledge to be exchanged, for boundaries to be crossed, and for consequences to echo through generations. When we look at the recurring tales from Mesopotamia, Greece, and the Norse world, it becomes difficult to dismiss these similarities as coincidence. Instead, they begin to feel like distant reflections of a shared cultural memory, a remembrance that human beings once believed themselves visited, guided, or challenged by forces beyond the mortal realm. This idea does not present itself through a single narrative or one dominant tradition. Rather, it appears like scattered fragments of a greater mosaic. In Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki descend not merely as rulers but as bearers of order. Agriculture, writing, and wisdom, the very foundation stones of civilization. Their presence signifies a moment when the heavens bent low toward the earth. Meanwhile, in Greece, the Titans embody a primal age when powerful beings shaped the world before withdrawing into shadow, leaving humans to inherit a realm carved by their conflict. And far in the northern cold, the Norse stories describe beings whose struggles and alliances subtly influenced the fate of both gods and humans, as if the realms were once intertwined threads of a single tapestry. When these stories are laid side by side, a striking continuity emerges. Each culture speaks of a time when the boundary between divine and human was porous, when messages, gifts, or warnings could pass between worlds. These memories, retold in new voices over centuries, suggest that ancient people believed themselves part of a cosmos alive with meaning, where human destiny was shaped in conversation with higher powers. The myths survive not because they recount factual events, but because they carried emotional truth about fear, hope, ambition, rebellion, and the longing to touch something greater than oneself. This shared memory becomes even more compelling when we consider how each tradition uses these divine interactions to explore human identity. The beings who bring knowledge often do so at a cost, reminding listeners that wisdom is powerful but never simple. Humanity's desire to understand the world has always been shadowed by risk, whether through disobedience, curiosity, or ambition. In the myths where heavenly beings rebel against supreme forces, The stories expose a deeper tension, the struggle between order and freedom, between the established structure of the cosmos and the irresistible pull of change. The echoes of this struggle can be heard in countless human stories, from the building of cities to the creation of laws, from the pursuit of scientific discovery to the conflicts born of power. As the narrative unfolds, what becomes clear is that these ancient tales are not isolated myths, but interconnected reflections of how our ancestors interpreted the forces that shaped their lives. The cycles of nature, the unpredictability of storms, the rise and fall of kingdoms, and the mysterious spark of human intelligence all demanded explanation. Myths provided that explanation, weaving divine presence into the fabric of reality. Whether these beings were portrayed as benevolent guides, stern overseers, or rebellious challengers, they acted as mirrors through which people examined their own strengths and vulnerabilities. Through this lens, the similarities across cultures begin to feel less like separate inventions and more like shared attempts to grasp the same universal truths. People living in distant places under different skies still dreamed of origins, still wondered about unseen forces, still sought meaning in the mysteries that surrounded them. Their stories, shaped by memory and imagination, reveal a human desire that has endured through every age. The desire to understand our place in a world that feels vast, powerful, and filled with echoes of something greater than ourselves. As the story moves toward its final reflection, the patterns woven through these ancient myths reveal something deeper than simple tales of gods visiting the earth or powerful beings shaping the fates of mortals. The real meaning lies in what these stories express about the human spirit itself. Across eras and civilizations, people used myths to interpret the invisible forces that shaped their lives, but beneath that purpose ran a quieter, more intimate longing, the desire to understand knowledge, to grasp wisdom, and to navigate the boundaries of power without losing themselves to its weight. The concluding thread of this narrative brings those ideas together, showing how these ancient tales preserve not only cultural memories, but also the emotional landscape of humanity's earliest attempts to define who we are. When ancient storytellers spoke of heavenly beings bringing sacred arts to humankind, they were not simply describing gods handing down tools or information. They were telling a deeper truth about how people perceived the value of knowledge. Wisdom did not appear as something casual or easily gained. It came from the heavens, from realms beyond ordinary reach, and therefore carried immense responsibility. Whether it was writing, farming, healing, or the understanding of natural cycles, knowledge was seen as a gift that could transform societies, strengthen communities, and elevate the human condition. Yet, woven into these myths was also the caution that wisdom could disrupt the balance if pursued recklessly, leading to conflict, punishment, or unintended change. Through these symbolic stories, cultures expressed the dual nature of understanding, its power to create and its potential to unsettle. Similarly, the tales of beings who challenged higher powers offered ancient listeners a safe space to explore the tension between obedience and ambition. These myths did not glorify rebellion for its own sake. Instead, they illuminated the universal struggle between order and freedom, structure and desire, limitation and possibility. When titans defied the Olympians, or when celestial figures tested the boundaries of their authority, they became reflections of human impulses, the urge to question, to push beyond restrictions, to pursue what lies just out of reach. The consequences these beings faced, whether exile, downfall, or transformation, reminded listeners that every pursuit of power demands sacrifice and carries weight. Through symbolic narrative, societies taught themselves to examine the moral dimensions of striving for greatness. As these stories traveled through generations, their symbolic value deepened rather than faded. People found in them a language for expressing hopes and fears that were too vast for ordinary words. They became mirrors in which communities could see their own struggles with leadership, justice, responsibility, and identity. When a myth described a divine being who granted humanity insight, it hinted at the belief that wisdom is sacred and should be respected. When another spoke of celestial conflict, it revealed an awareness that power must be held with humility and care. Over time, these lessons became part of cultural memory, guiding behavior, shaping traditions, and influencing how societies envisioned their place in the world. What unites all these stories is the recognition that humanity has always sought meaning beyond the visible. The symbolic messages in these myths illuminated the inner workings of the human heart long before philosophy, science, or recorded history attempted to do the same. They captured the timeless desire to understand how life should be lived, how knowledge should be used, and how power should be balanced with compassion. Even today, long after the civilizations that created them have transformed or disappeared, these myths continue to resonate because they reflect something enduring about the human experience. They remind us that our quest for wisdom is ancient, that our fascination with power is universal, and that the boundaries we cross, whether in thought, ambition, or imagination, define our journey as profoundly as the destinations we reach. In the world of our ancestors, long before written laws or scientific explanations, mythology served as the lens through which people made sense of their surroundings. The storms that shook the mountains, the quiet movements of the stars, the cycle of seasons, and even the unpredictable turns of human fate were all interpreted through stories that carried layers of meaning. As these myths evolved, they became more than simple narratives. They turned into guides that shaped how communities understood nature, organized their societies, and navigated the delicate borders between right and wrong. When placed alongside the earlier tales of divine visitors, rebellious beings, and sacred knowledge, this aspect of mythology becomes a vital thread that unites the entire narrative. It reveals how ancient people used stories not only to remember the past, but also to understand the world they lived in each day. To them, nature was alive with intention. The rising sun was not a distant sphere of fire, but the daily journey of a powerful presence whose warmth sustained life. Thunder was not just sound, but the voice of a force expressing strength, warning, or authority. In this worldview, mythology offered explanations that brought order to uncertainty. When a river flooded or a harvest failed, people sought meaning in the myths they had inherited, believing that these tales contained clues about harmony, imbalance, and the unseen forces that governed the world. This connection between story and nature did more than soothe the fear. It gave communities a shared language to interpret events that lay beyond their control. Mythology also shaped social order by providing models for leadership, justice, and responsibility. The relationships between gods and humans, and the conflicts among divine beings themselves, often mirrored the struggles of real societies. When a powerful figure in a myth acted with wisdom, it suggested the qualities a leader should embody. When another acted with pride and brought ruin upon themselves, it warned listeners of the dangers of overreaching. These stories offered communities a framework for governance long before laws were carved into stone. Through them, people learned the value of balance, cooperation, and loyalty, and they came to understand that harmony within a community depended on respecting both the visible rules and the unseen principles that myths symbolized. Perhaps the most profound way mythology shaped ancient life was through its exploration of moral boundaries. The actions of gods, heroes, and mythical beings provided dramatic illustrations of choices that humans might face in more subtle ways. Myths about stolen knowledge, broken promises, or forbidden ambition taught that every decision carries consequences. Tales of compassion, sacrifice, and resilience showed that virtue was not merely an expectation but a path that demanded courage. These stories did not dictate morality through strict commands. Instead, they portrayed the emotional weight of moral decisions. They allowed listeners to witness the possible outcomes of pride, generosity, betrayal, or loyalty, making these lessons resonate deeply and personally. As this story brings together the themes of divine interaction, the pursuit of wisdom, and the search for meaning, mythology emerges not as a collection of distant tales, but as a living system through which ancient people understood themselves. Each myth, whether describing the intervention of heavenly beings or the shaping of nature through divine will, served a purpose in helping communities navigate their world. Through storytelling, they created a bridge between the visible and invisible, the known and the unknown, the human and the divine, and in that bridge, they found a way to define their place in the vast tapestry of existence, guided not by certainty but by the shared belief that every force in the world, whether gentle or powerful, held a story waiting to be understood. In many of the ancient myths that have survived through time, the struggles of heavenly beings echo with a strangely familiar resonance, as if their stories were crafted not only to describe celestial conflicts, but also to mirror the hidden tensions within the human heart. When a divine figure challenges authority or seeks forbidden knowledge, the tale becomes more than an account of cosmic rebellion. It transforms into a symbolic reflection of ambition, curiosity, and the inevitable weight of consequence. As this narrative weaves together the earlier themes of divine interaction, sacred knowledge, and the shaping of natural and moral order, the rebellion of heavenly beings emerges as a powerful metaphor that deepens the story's unity and meaning. To ancient listeners, the defiance of a celestial being was not simply an act of disobedience but a vivid dramatization of desires they recognized within themselves. Ambition has always driven people to reach beyond what they already possess, to test limits, and to pursue goals that promise transformation. In myths where a heavenly figure seeks greater power or attempts to reshape the established order, that ambition is magnified to a divine scale, allowing communities to explore its potential without facing its real-world dangers. These tales granted listeners a chance to see how desire could ignite both creativity and turmoil. Through them, they confronted the double-edged nature of striving for more, its ability to elevate and its capacity to disrupt. Yet ambition alone did not fuel these celestial narratives. Curiosity played an equally profound role, a force that has always pushed humanity to discover what lies beyond the horizon of understanding. When a divine being seeks forbidden knowledge or attempts to uncover secrets hidden by higher powers, the myth captures a universal instinct, the urge to explore the unknown. This curiosity, while celebrated as a driving force of progress, also carried warnings. Ancient cultures understood that every revelation carries a burden, and that insight can reshape the world in ways both wondrous and unpredictable. By portraying heavenly beings drawn to knowledge that was meant to remain concealed, myths expressed the delicate balance between discovery and restraint. They reminded listeners that curiosity, when guided by wisdom, leads to illumination, but when left unchecked, may lead to consequences impossible to anticipate. Those consequences formed the final thread binding these stories to human experience. Rebellion in myth rarely passed without a reckoning. Sometimes the fallen were cast into distant realms, separated from the divine harmony they once inhabited. Sometimes they transformed into forces that shaped the world from the shadows. In every case, the outcome served to illustrate a timeless truth. Choices made in pursuit of power or knowledge ripple outward, affecting not only the one who acts but the entire order of existence. For ancient audiences, these consequences offered a way to understand the moral dimensions of desire. They showed that ambition demands responsibility, that curiosity carries weight, and that the pursuit of change requires an awareness of the balance that must be preserved. When placed alongside the earlier reflections on divine gifts, cultural memory, and humanity's search for meaning, The rebellion of heavenly beings becomes a central metaphor that brings coherence to the entire narrative. It illustrates how ancient societies used mythology to examine the complex impulses that shape human life. These stories allowed people to look inward through the lens of the divine, to explore their own strengths and vulnerabilities with clarity that ordinary experience could not provide. In doing, mythology became not only a record of cosmic struggles, but a timeless exploration of the desires that move humanity forward and the responsibilities that define the path we choose to follow. As our journey through these ancient echoes draws to a close, we return to the heart of what these myths have always offered. Connection. Across distant lands and long-vanished civilizations, people shaped stories to understand their world, to explore the mysteries that lay beyond sight, and to reflect the struggles that lived quietly within themselves. By following the footsteps of divine visitors, witnessing the bold defiance of celestial beings, and tracing the symbolic lessons woven through every tale, we step into the imagination of our ancestors and see how deeply their questions resemble our own. The longing for wisdom, the fascination with power, the search for balance, and the desire to interpret the forces shaping our lives, these are threads that bind humanity across time. In every myth we explored, there was something more than spectacle. The storms, the rebellions, the gifts from the heavens, the moral boundaries, they were all parts of a greater language. A language through which people expressed hope, fear, wonder, and responsibility. The Anunnaki offering the seeds of civilization, the Titans challenging an established order, the Norse beings navigating the fragile connection between realms. All these stories captured the timeless push and pull between what we know and what we yearn to understand. They showed that even in a world filled with uncertainties, meaning could be found in narrative, wisdom could be preserved through symbolism, and identity could be shaped through shared memory. As we leave this world of ancient voices and return to our own, the continuity becomes unmistakable. The myths may be old, but the emotions they explore remain familiar. They remind us that humanity has always sought to interpret its place in the universe, to grapple with ambition and curiosity, and to learn from the consequences of desire. By revisiting these stories, we do not simply look back. We look inward, we recognize echoes of ourselves, our questions, our challenges, our dreams, and understand why these tales have endured for thousands of years. Thank you for accompanying this journey into the mythic landscapes that shaped the earliest human imaginations. Your presence here gives life to these stories once more, allowing them to continue their long passage through history. If you enjoyed this exploration and wish to travel further into the mysteries of ancient worlds, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us keep these narratives alive, bringing more stories, insights, and discoveries to those who share the same curiosity and wonder. Until our next journey together, may the echoes of these ancient myths stay with you, reminding you of the enduring bond between story and humanity.